Hey there, Tim Stoddard here. And on this week's video, I am going to talk to you about creating multiple streams of income. In my opinion, this is the most valuable business lesson that anybody can learn because once you create multiple streams of income, this is how you put yourself in a position where you don't have to continuously start working. This is the difference between generating wealth and getting rich. An analogy that I like to use and that I like to remind myself of often is that rich people have a lot of money in the bank and wealthy people have a lot of assets. So if that doesn't make a lot of sense to you right now, keep watching this video and I assure you that it will. So what we're going to do in this video is I'm going to go back and forth between full screen, just talking to you, and also going through an article that I wrote on this topic about a year ago, because this article has some important visualizations in it, and I think it'll really help you. Okay, so let's get started. My life completely changed when I was 17. I was on the subway in Philadelphia, and I was reading a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Guy Kiyosaki. And the book made the argument that rich people don't work. What rich people do is they stack assets. And one of the most important lessons in the book was the definition of an asset, at least in the view of Guy Kiyosaki. And in his view, and this is a definition that I personally like and I use, an asset is something that puts money in your bank account. That's it. And a liability is something that takes money out of your bank account. So if you see it from this lens, a lot of what we traditionally think of assets is not actually so. So a lot of us think of our house and where we live and our mortgage as an asset. But in actuality, from Guy Kiyosaki's definition, your mortgage is a liability because it takes money out of your bank account. Whereas if you were paying a mortgage on a rental property and that rental property was putting money into your bank account, then it would be a liability. So it's a very, very simple distinction between the two. But once you see that an asset is something that puts money in your bank account, it's not necessarily even something that you own, although you do have to own an asset. But the point isn't about ownership. The point is about function. And if whatever it is puts money into your bank account, it's an asset. If it takes money out of your bank account, it's a liability. So let's go a little bit more in depth here, and you can see the difference between rich people and poor people. Okay, so what we're doing here, this is my website, timstodds.com, and this is an article that I wrote August 5th, 2022, but these lessons are still very important, and I'm revisiting a lot of these concepts. So this visualization that we're looking at is something that really, really changed how I perceive things. So what we have is there's four quadrants. There's income, there's expenses, and this is your income statement. And then there's your balance sheet, which is your assets and your liabilities. So a poor person, the arrow here, this is your cash, right? This is the money that you make. So a poor person has a job, which you can see with this little yellow line, and their money through their paycheck comes in as income in the form of a salary. And then that money goes right into the box of expenses. And so before anything else happens, they're already paying their taxes, rent, food, transportation, and clothes. So this is a poor person. This person never has the chance to accumulate wealth because they never have a chance to accumulate assets because all of their income comes to them in the form of a salary, and then the cash immediately flows into the expenses tab, which is what they have to pay for on a daily basis. Okay, so let's scroll down. This is a middle class person, and in a lot of ways, in the American economic system, or the Western economic system, I should say, the middle class person is even more screwed than the poor person because a lot of times poor people are broke, but they're not in debt, they're not underwater. And so the same principles apply. This is your income, these are your expenses, and then in your balance sheet, these are your assets, and then these are your liabilities. So remember, your liabilities is things that take money out of your bank account. And so these are different than expenses. It's really semantics because expenses are just things that you have to pay for, whereas liabilities are things that that systematically take money out of your bank account. So we got the same thing here. We got your job, and your job flows cash into the income box in the form of a salary. So then what happens next is that cash immediately goes to the expenses box, and it pays for taxes, your mortgage, your transportation, your food, and your clothing. Well, then it goes back to the liabilities section where it continues to pay for consumer liabilities. So this is again your mortgage. In the example that he uses in the book, middle class people are the people that buy mortgages on debt, basically with money they don't have yet. So it's a distinction. There's a difference between your mortgage payment, which is the house that you own, and a mortgage that might be something else, whether it's like a business property or a lease or something along those lines. Consumer loans. So this is like a car loan, probably, or sometimes middle class people buy luxury goods on loan, or sometimes they finance furniture because middle class people they make more money, right? Like their salary is higher, but a lot of times their wealth is actually lower because they're already getting deeper and deeper into the hole before that money actually turns into an asset. And so middle class people spend money before they even have it. And that's why you can see the cash flow go from their job to their salary, pay for their expenses, and then flow into the liability section. And then in many cases, go back to the expenses just to pay for life, right? To pay for the movie ticket that you and your husband or your wife go to together, to pay for dinner, to pay for clothes, whatever it may be. So a middle class person, their money comes into them in the form of a salary, goes out in the form of expenses, goes out again in the form of liabilities, and then many times goes back into the expenses tab and then out the door. There's for people that are listening to this, there's a little meme from one of my favorite books ever, Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. And there's a picture of the narrator for people who have seen the movie of Edward Norton. And it says, "We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like." And I keep that quote to heart. The book Fight Club was like really important for me, just in terms of like how I want to live my life. And I think that line is very, very pertinent to the American or the Western status game, where we buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. And this is how the middle class people in America live. Okay, so up next, we have a rich person. And this is really where I want to focus our attention, because a rich person does exactly, they see the whole game completely different. They don't have a job, they don't have a salary. Although in many cases, the way to get to being a rich person is to start with the salary, because you need cash flow, right? This arrow and this line, it's a vector, right? So there's directionality in this line. It represents cash flow. It represents the movement of money. And so what rich people do is they take their cash and then they buy assets. And those assets come to them in the form of income. And then as that income compounds, they then take that money and they put it back into the assets department. So rich people buy assets, they take the cash flow in the form of income, and then they buy more assets, which generates more income, which they then use to buy more assets. And so if you really get into the book, this is where rich people can start playing money games, because they can use this cycle of money to never really pay taxes. And I know it sounds super messed up, in a lot of ways it is, but when you have these many assets, you can then take out loans against those assets, and you don't have to pay taxes on loans because it's debt, right? So you're not actually establishing, there's a word for it, forgive me. You're not establishing any income. You're not showing any income in your income statement. You're actually showing debt because you took out money in the form of a loan against your assets. But the reality of it is that the cash continues to flow in the form of assets. This is a concept that really, really changed my life. And if you haven't read the book, I recommend that you read it. It was a life-changing book for me, but this concept was very life-changing for me as well. So this is all well and good. I'm sure that as you see these visualizations, it makes sense to you, but how do we get there, right? How do we get to the point where we can start buying assets? Well, let's talk about that before we finish up. My personal method of generating cash flow is to start a service business, is to start an agency. In the world of digital entrepreneurship, and especially in the world of like content creation, right? Everybody wants to paint a portrait of their lives and make things bigger than they are and have some kind of billion-dollar SaaS company, right? But agencies or service businesses, I just call them agencies, but an agency can mean you're an accountant, you're a wedding photographer, you're an SEO like me, anything where you're trading a service and time in exchange for money. That's what I call an agency. And starting off with an agency is the best route because they're instantly profitable. As soon as you have your first client or your first customer, then you're making money, you're profitable. There's not really any upstart costs. You should build a website for your business, but you don't have to. You don't need to put any money into product development. You just need to have a skill. And then you get a customer and you start selling your skill. And they're cash flow positive. And so, my summary in this whole idea of generating multiple streams of income is to have at the foundation of it all a cash flowing mechanism, a cash flowing machine. And that's why no matter how many assets I've been able to build into my own personal portfolio, I still make sure that the agency, that Stodzy Internet Marketing and also Digital Commerce Partners, which is the agency connected to Copyblogger, those are still really the majority of my time and my focus because it is with that cash that the agency generates that I'm able to buy assets. And then those assets generate more cash, which I can use to buy more assets, but I never actually have to depend on the cash that those assets generate. Because in a lot of cases, that stuff doesn't actually start paying off for months or even years into the future. And so for me, and my recommendation to anybody that actually wants to start generating wealth for themselves is to start a service business, start an agency, start something, a freelance company, become a freelance writer, something where you are actually exchanging your time for money. And then you can hire employees. Then you can build out that agency to the point where you can get out from underneath it. And then you have like a cash flow mechanism that you can use to support this flywheel of buying assets and generating cash flow. If you want to learn more about how to start an agency, I recommend going to agencyclarity.com. I provide a free course, or you can buy the product, which is Agency Secrets. You can find that at agencyclarity.com/agency-secrets. It's $99. I'm happy to walk you through anything or any questions that you have. If you don't have the money to buy the course, no problem. But if you can learn these fundamentals, if you can learn how to generate cash on your own and then be disciplined enough to stay away from buying liabilities and to spend your cash, to spend your money on assets, you'll generate wealth that will work for you and compound and create leverage for the rest of your life. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate your time. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, leave any questions you have in the comments, and I will see you guys next week. All right, peace.